Would you all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call.
Mayor Knutson.
Here.
District 1 Morset.
Here.
District 2 Brokaw. Here. District 3 Bernard. Here. District 4 Wyland is absent. District 5 O'Malley.
Here.
District 6 Burchell.
Here.
Thank you. At this time, we take comments and suggestions from citizens present. If you would like to address the council on any item that's not on our agenda, you may do so at this time. Number 4 is our consent agenda items. Will you read the consent agenda for us?
To approve the regular meeting minutes of April 21st, 2008. To approve the conditional use permit for Sally Hobbins for an antique store at 825 2nd Street with the permit to be reviewed in 3 years, April of 2011, and contingent on the following conditions. No display of antiques for sale on the porch or yard areas. 3 off-street parking spaces provided with a small sign, 1 square foot, to indicate the location. Permit issued to Sally Hobbins and not transferable. Antique business to be open no more than 5 days per week with business hours between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. Signage permitted shall not exceed 1 square foot in area for each business identification and off-street parking, amended to 3 square foot in 2005. To approve the conditional use permit for Skits Outreach Services, 900 4th Street, for Teen Theater Group Productions, office facility, and off-street parking, with the condition of off-street parking on the south side of Orange Street, and with review in 3 years, April 2011. To approve claims for payment in the amount of $401,014.54. A detailed description is available in the clerk's office on request. To approve the issuance of an amusement device operator's license to Namco Cybertainment Incorporated, 877 Supreme Drive, Bensonville, Illinois, and amusement device permits to Namco Cybertainment Incorporated for 6 machines or games at Hudson Cinema 9, and to Bertha Fenner for 12 machines or game tables at Dibbo's, 517 2nd Street. To place on file the April 29, 2008 memo from the City Administrator regarding health insurance consultants' quotes and timetables. To place on file the quarterly reports of the City Clerk and the Library Director, and the Joint Library Board minutes of March 10th and April 14th, 2008, and the Community Access Board minutes of April 22nd, 2008. That is all.
I'd like to ask that we remove the quarterly report of the Library Director, take that as a separate item, and also the Joint Library Board minutes.
Move for approval.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Morset?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
Burchell?
Yes.
Bernard? Yes. Brokaw?
Consent agenda is approved as amended. Could I ask then, in the interest of Linda Donaldson not having to wait, that we take her report first and out of order? Would any objection to that? All right, Linda.
Good evening. I'm Linda Donaldson, and I noticed I was on the agenda. I sent some information to you about the library. I'd like you to know, for the new members, that I am the library director, and I've been here since September of 2003, and you're welcome to call me at any time. I'm just going to do a real short report because you're quite busy. One of the things I'd like to point out is on this sheet, it shows the circulation summary, and I believe it was put in your packets. Our circulation in March had increased by 10.5% from the previous year, January through March. This last month, January through April, the circulation percentage of increase was 16%. One of the biggest things that we offer in our library are children's programs. And on this report, it'll give you the attendance for our programs. You will notice on the top here, the March 2007, the total attendance was 823. When you get to the March 2008 one down below here, you'll notice it's only 510. And I have put a little note on here of why that was a decrease, mainly because spring break, we decided this year we would no longer offer programs during spring break because the attendance was so low. And we had the opportunity to send my staff to the Public Library Association meeting in Minneapolis. This is not something that comes around here very often. This is the first time it's been offered this close to home. It's normally in California, Cincinnati. And the cost for attending that program or the conference, we were able to get $200 stipends per person from the MORE system, the MORE online catalog. Yes, we do pay a fee, and they were just really returning it to us. But without that, I wouldn't have been able to send as many people. And that's all I have to say. I appreciate you listening to me this evening, and I realize you're busy. And as I said before, if you would have any questions on anything, please call me. Thank you. Any questions? Okay.
Questions? Okay.
Okay, thanks.
I have a couple of comments about this, and maybe it can tie in with, I asked that the Joint Library Board minutes be removed from the agenda. There are a couple of issues in the minutes that I'd like to point out to you. I've got a couple of comments. I need to be careful because this item has not been noticed, so that there can't be discussion about this at this time, but if you noted on the back page of the April 14th Library Board minutes, there was discussion at that meeting about whether the town of Hudson would pay for their portion of an $1,800 sum of money that the Library Board allocated to be transferred to the Hudson Area Library Foundation for mailings during the referendum. And the town of Hudson objected to that and sent a memo to the Library Board that they'd be withholding the funds. I wanted to draw your attention to that and also tell you that I got a letter today from Jeff Zeiss, the treasurer of the Hudson Area Library Foundation, stating that they would be refunding that money back to the Library Board because there's been some question about whether that was an appropriate transfer. That's one item, and just a point of information for you. The second thing on these April 14th Library Board minutes was a transfer that was made by the Library Board from their 2008 budget of $10,000 to the Hudson Area Library Foundation to fund, and I think it came from the site and planning expense line item, and it was to be used for investigation of the NMC building, for acquiring information and professional judgment of architecture and feasibility study. My comment to the council is that I have some concerns about the process here. And my concerns are that in the referendum, the language in the referendum said, should the city, the village, and the towns use public funds jointly to pay for acquiring and developing and operating a new joint library. In this are a couple of questions. One is, who should be doing this work of investigating that potential acquiring and developing that property? And as it stands right now, our library board is not authorized by the library, by the joint library agreement to acquire land or buildings. And we need to have a new agreement before that. So I have one question about whether it's appropriate for public funds to be spent pursuing a particular building without any elected public officials involved? That's a question. And I intend to ask for this to be on a future agenda. I want to just bring up a couple of questions briefly right here. Here it is. Who should be negotiating? That's a question. Currently, to my knowledge, no elected officials have been asked to be part of the process. I'm not sure that's what the voters expected, or think is going on right now. And so that's one question. Who should be negotiating? And, should there be some, and, should we be involved in this process? So that's my comment. With that, we have before us accepting Linda Donaldson's quarterly report and accepting these minutes. If there's a motion to that effect, I'm open to it.
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And motion is approved. We'll move on to item 6, reports of standing committees. The Plan Commission, number 3, Certificate of Compliance, Child Daycare, Little Minds Learning Center, 2400 Foxglove Way, GSGB Caldwell Banker Commercial, Jim Fletcher. And Denny Darnold's here to talk about that.
Plan Commission recommends approval of certificate of compliance with the following conditions. Hours of operation Monday through Friday, 6 to 8:30 p.m. and Saturday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Outdoor play area utilized only from the period of 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. with a maximum of 15 children at one time. State of Wisconsin group care daycare license required to be maintained, and fence not to exceed 6 feet in height to enclose the play area. And Mr. Jim Fletcher, the owner of the building, and Ms. Stacy Barnhart and Todd Barnhart, the proposed operators of the daycare here. If there's any particular questions that you may have of them, or I'd be pleased also to answer any questions.
Plan Commission recommended approval. Do we have a motion?
I do have a question for Denny,
Sure.
Mr. Mayor. Denny, have we looked into, or do we have an ordinance on the amount of daycare facilities in the city of Hudson, or a maximum, minimum of how many should be?
Well, no, there's not, and I've discussed that issue with Catherine McKittrick, our city attorney. We do not feel that the city's in place to control competitive nature of a business like this. Catherine may want to share her opinion.
Yeah, we've got a zoning ordinance that sets conditions and requirements and gives the city an opportunity to look at it, but it's not the city's function to control competition. The idea of the zoning is to make sure it's appropriately placed.
Okay.
Now, I will, if I could comment on that, I have talked to the Wisconsin State, and they try to encourage or discourage or ask people for marketing analysis and so forth. But they're similar to the city of Hudson. They really cannot tell them, no, you cannot or can or cannot. Now, it's my understanding the last 2 daycares have come before the state. There has been some caution expressed to those daycares about where they may or may not be successful. But it's not. Catherine and I had quite a lengthy conversation about this, and we do not feel it's in the place of the zoning ordinance to control the competitive nature of these types of businesses.
Other comments or questions before we have a motion on this?
Move to accept the recommendation of the Plan Commission with the conditions that were enumerated by Denny Darnold.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And a second. Now, any discussion on the motion to approve the recommendation? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No by Mr. Morissette. The motion passes. Next item, Finance Committee application for operators licenses. Correct? Yep. Okay. Finance Committee recommend approval. We found nothing irregular about any of the applications. What's your pleasure?
Mr. Mayor, I recuse myself.
Move to
Note that-
approve.
Second.
Note that Mr. Morissette's recused. We have a motion by O'Malley, second by Burchell. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The applications for operators' licenses are approved. Next item is applications for fireworks paraphernalia, seller's permits. Finance Committee recommends approval. All of the applicants have been licensed in Hudson previously. Do we have a motion?
Move for approval.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And a second. Any discussion on these? Questions, comments?
Question.
Question.
I'm assuming that all signage regulations that we have in place apply to these organizations as well.
We try to watch that issue pretty closely once they're, also we have an information meeting for all the applicants or licensees, just prior to the sales period, and we go over all those regulations. Police department, fire department, I participate in those discussions with them.
Other comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The applications for fireworks permits are approved. Next item, the review of the St. Croix EMS financial status and contracts. We'll ask Betty Crusoe to give you a quick update on this. We've got some updated financial statements, a balance sheet before us that includes assets and liabilities going back for 2007, 2006, and 2005, and a corresponding income statement, and then an updated quarterly income statement type revenues and expenses report for the first quarter. And that's where there's a correction to be made from last time. So Betty, would you give us a little update?
Sure. I'd like to give you a little history, and I have Eric with me to help with any of the technical questions that you might have about it. I can give you all the financial information. But just so council has a kind of a background on this, back in 2005, the EMS went into a paramedic service where we had been a EMT service prior to that. So we upped our level and had hired full-time people at that time to cover 24/7. So with that, we had many changes that went on, and we decided that we would look at it from a 3 to 5 year period. We knew that changes would have to be made. We'd have to keep monitoring this. So as we're going through and monitoring this, we have different things that have arisen. I'll point them out to you in the financial statement. So on the balance sheet, back in 2005, we actually had a cash balance, and we were functioning, and we were just breaking even at that point. That's, I think, Eric kind of phased in the paramedics. We started out, I think, with the vehicles first, and then he added personnel. And so as he phased in, the expenses had increased. So in 2006, we ended up going into a deficit position, almost at a cash-breaking position. So we started watching it pretty closely. In 2007, then, we did go into like a $90,000 cash deficit. We're covering that with, they have a special fund set aside basically for the replacement of the ambulance. So we cover shortfalls with those funds. We haven't touched those funds. We just kind of utilize those monies until we get replenished. Beginning of the quarter, we get all our money from the other districts, so we go back into a positive situation because we get the contributions from all the districts. So at that point, there's nothing except that our accounts receivable in 2005 were $250,000, and our accounts receivable in 2007 are $530,000. So we're doing a lot more service, we're doing a lot more billing, and we have a lot more out in receivable. And that's why we have a deficit cash position also, because we have so much tied up in accounts receivable. On the income statement, we've gone from 2005 of basically having a $16,000 income To 2006, we had a $45,000 loss, and in 2007, we have a $66,000 loss.
What percentage of increase is that? 10%? What,
We're talking revenues or
each
losses?
year? Yeah.
Well, we'd have a 30% loss in 2006, and then another 20% more there in 2007. A lot of this loss has to do with the write-offs. As we looked at this in 2006, I think we adjusted the rates for our runs, and in 2007, we looked at adjusting rates and changing personnel costs. Those are a lot of things. Eric has been working really hard on coming up with different ways of doing things. He has the chase vehicles, which takes down, we don't have so much maintenance on ambulance running at every time when a chase vehicle takes off. We have a lower income vehicle taking care of some of those things. We have him utilizing part-time people or volunteers or however you want to classify them, but he does not have a 24/7 full-time situation, which would require probably 6 to 9 more employees. So he does a lot of innovative thinking. I think he was in a national magazine for all the things that he has done with this ambulance service. And as we'll point out, he's done this under a lot of the costs, like other situations in Wisconsin where you have other ambulance services, they're supplying $24 per person or $27 per capita. Our capita is at $10.50. And go ahead.
So hear me out. How do we fix this? Do we increase the per capita?
We're kind of fixed right now for 2008, and I'll get into that situation. So
Let's just wait with the comments until she finishes, and then we'll have time for questions.
So as you notice, as our rates increase, so do our write-offs. And that has to do with the Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement. They give a standard, this is how much we're going to pay, and we end up having to write it off. So when our runs were at $300 or $400 for the billing, we had a smaller write-off. Our runs now can run up to $1,000 for a billing, so we might have an $800 write-off. So our write-offs have gone up. We have like a 37% write-off. They went from 19% to 37%. So that's why you see a higher amount of write-offs on our books. It's a normal situation. If you look at the standards for the ambulance service, 37, 40 to 50 even percent can be written off due to Medicare and Medicaid. So if there are any questions on that one, the next one, I restated the 3 months for March 31st, and then I projected out the 2008. So the restatement had to do when they had given us the information that we book from the company that does the billing. They had given us an amount in a write-off situation, but actually was an accounts receivable amount. Staff picked it up as a write-off, went through the books as a write-off, and that's why they were on there wrong. So instead of being $330,000, it's $132,000 for write-offs. So that's right in the 37% range, and so we're right back on schedule with that. When you go down and you project it out for 2008, we're in a break-even situation again. And that had to do because we changed the stipends or the contributions that the townships and the village and the Hudson pay per capita. We went from $7 to $10.50, gave us $88,000 more in revenue, and therefore we were able to cover the shortfall. That they did on purpose to take care of it. We were going to monitor it and see. It looks like they're going to be okay for 2008. 2009, we were looking at possible increase in the contribution again. So just trying to keep council aware of what things are coming up for the budget next year.
Good. Any questions for Betty about that report? Any other comments or questions about EMS in general? Are we ready to accept this update and move on?
Mr. Mayor, the agenda item also mentions contracts. Has the meeting, the intergovernmental meeting occurred yet for discussion of this? Are you at liberty to discuss anything about that?
At the intergovernmental meeting, we did not discuss this item in depth.
Oh, okay.
There was a very brief discussion of the fact that with the current update, the number that we had for quarterly report was in error, that with the update, we're on projection to be at a more or less break even. That was the extent of the update. I intend to go on a quarterly basis for us to talk about this in finance, for the EMS advisory board to get this quarterly, and for the intergovernmental advisory council to be updated on a regular basis quarterly as well. The reason the contract was on there was just that I was looking into at the time that there was a shortfall was what is in our contract for if there is an annual shortfall. At this point, that's maybe a moot point. There is a procedure laid out in there for how that would be handled if it happens. But I think what's happened here is that by increasing the per capita, which was a change that was made some time ago, it looks as though that's still about an appropriate change so that we run more or less revenue neutral. There was a decision made a few years ago to go to advanced life support and have real paramedics. We have a higher quality ambulance service now than what we used to have. That costs more money. And that money is not entirely recouped by the charges that you can charge, partly because a lot of the people that are receiving the care there are on Medicare and Medicaid, where the reimbursement is capped, and we don't have any control over that. And so part of the thing is, while we'll try our best to run the EMS as a business, I think Eric's been doing his best to watch expenses. We talked in finance about looking into the insurance, whether that could be improved. We talked a little bit about the collection rate success and whether there's some different things we can do there to narrow down that 37% uncollected write-offs. I think there are some things we can continue to look at. But the bottom line is that we're getting excellent ambulance service. We're paying roughly $11 per $10.50 per capita. For this type of advanced life support, in many communities they're paying $25 per capita and more. So we're still operating a pretty efficient ambulance service as it is. We got a little bit of a scare with that quarterly report, and now we can see that we're actually pretty close to break even, provided things go the way we expect them to go. So we have to keep watching that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
I don't know, do we need a motion for that? Probably not. That was just an update. Ready to move on?
Could I ask one
Yes.
quick question again, though? For the future, what's an ideal magic per capita number, ideal for this size of community, to look down the road, so we're not raising the per capita every other year?
I think, as you look at it right now, the per capita is covering our costs. I think if we were going to go, we have to look at personnel and how we keep managing it, and that's, Eric's, what he's been working on. I think it depends. As you do per capita, you're going to have areas that can't afford it, North Hudson Township. So I don't know how much more the city would pick up. So, it's a hard answer to give you right now. All I can say right now is 1050 is working. But we try not to raise it every year. We try to function and see how it works.
Any other questions? Let's move on to the next item. Request for co-sponsorship and funding of the Miss Hudson pageant. The Finance Committee reviewed this and has recommended that we approve an expenditure of $4,000 from residual 2007 room tax funds, the $4,000 sum to be used for refurbishing, actually buying a new trailer underneath.
Was it up to?
Up to.
Yeah.
Up to.
They have to provide receipts.
And they have to provide receipts, so that's part A of the recommendation. And the second part is that we provide sponsorship to the Miss Hudson pageant for 2008 in an amount of $2,500.
Move for approval. Do you want them together or separate? Or do you need them?
It can all be together, I believe.
Well, unless people have a issue on one or the other.
Well,
might
you
want to
make
go
the motion
separate.
as
I'll
it
move
is,
to
and I'll
approve
go.
both the maintenance fund
second.
and co-sponsorship.
So we have a motion for up to $4,000 for the float renovation and for $2,500 for the sponsorship. Is there a second?
I'll second.
A second. Further discussion? Questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. That is approved. Next item is number 9, amend the 2008 budget. Betty, would you come up to the lectern? The Finance Committee reviewed this and recommended approval of the budget amendments.
As we've discussed over the past few meetings, we have had some budget changes. One of them was the carry forward of the leftover funds from the police department last year, and there was some leftover IT funds that he's going to utilize this year. And then the other ones were some adjustments for the capital outlay expenditures that were presented to you at the last meeting. So I told you at that time that I would bring you a formal amendment to the budget. So this is what this is at this point. This is basically the stuff we've approved in the past, and this is the amendment that the council's proposing. What we would be utilizing is about $69,903 of fund balance, and there was miscellaneous revenues of $750 that were brought in for the sale of some articles in Public Works. So with those funds, we're utilizing some general government expenses, the IT expenses for $9,500, public safety expenses were for the police, and then the Public Works was for some conference expenses for one of the employees to attend. I believe it had to do with signaling.
Okay. Any questions for Betty about the proposed amendments to our 2008 budget?
I
Yes.
do have a question, and whether it's the time or not, with this, the cement truck business in Public Works, and whether it's justifiable of taking it out, or if we can do the in-house work cheaper than going out.
Well, would you like a motion first before we discuss?
Ideally, I would.
Okay, well, to go along with what Randy just said, I will move that we accept the budget adjustments with the exception of the, what is termed the one-ton cement truck, that we reduce that amount to $40,000 and put it back in the budget. Reduce it from 45 to 40 and replace it back in the 2008 capital expenditure outlay budget, so that we can discuss your question.
Okay, the motion is to accept the proposed budget changes with the addition of $40,000 for a one-ton utility truck for Public Works.
I'll second that. For
And we have
discussion.
a second. Do you have that motion?
Without the 1-ton cement truck.
No, what he meant to do was add that back in.
Okay.
And it was originally 45,000, and the proposal is to add it back at 40,000.
At 40, that's correct.
Everyone clear on what the motion is? And what's going on here is that the council, in the original budget and in the original capital outlay approved last fall by the Common Council, had intended that there be borrowing of, I believe it's 2.3 million. I had made some suggestions at your last meeting. Go ahead with any discussion on the motion on the table.
Well, let me explain why we would like to put back in the budget, because to take it out of the budget makes it look on the surface as though we're saving money, when in fact that is not the case. First of all, as you've just alluded, Mr. Mayor, it's not a cement truck. That's a misnomer. It's used to carry cement materials, but it's a utility truck. It's a Ford pickup truck. It's an F-350 one-ton pickup in which the pickup cab in the back is removed and a flatbed is placed there. And on that flatbed, we carry many different items, cement bags and cement mixing materials, water to do that. We also carry water for asphalt repair work. OSHA dictates that when we use hot mix, there's cold mix asphalt and there's hot mix asphalt. When we use hot mix, we have to have on that truck, or we have to have a utility truck, a truck with a water tank on it for spraying down any individual who gets hot mix on him. That truck serves that purpose as well. That truck also carries a snowplow, because in the wintertime, when we're not doing cement work, we're plowing snow with it. The price of the truck with all of the appurtenances for lumber for forming up, sidewalk repair, all the water, everything else that we're going to have on it, the pump, the fittings, the metal fabrication, the toolboxes, everything purchased and installed is with our trade-in at the present value, $37,500. We're asking for $40,000 just in case there's any kind of overrun. This truck we're talking about is now in its 22nd year of service to the city of Hudson. As the car dealers would say, it doesn't owe us anything. It has 68,000 miles on it, and the worst kind of miles. A couple of blocks here, a couple of miles there. Doubt that the truck ever takes a 10-mile trip at one time. It goes around the city performing all these tasks that are too small to be outsourced to a corporation or a contractor who does this kind of work. I have checked, and Tom Zulli is here tonight, our lead man in Public Works. He has checked also, and this continues to be the case. The truck is costing us more money to repair than a new truck would cost us. Last year it cost us $3,430, and right now we have an estimate on the current work that needs to be done on the truck, and I would like to add that none of this includes transmission or engine work, because Dan Ortner, who is our mechanic at our garage, does that work for us and does a very capable job of that. We currently have no problems with that engine or that transmission, which is very good, because should that engine blow up on us, this truck is worth $0 instead of the $5,000 trade-in value. Right now, we have a quote from Allwins for $4,262 worth of repairs that need to be done before this truck can be used for its summer work. This is leaf springs, this is brake rotors, and most importantly, tie rod ends. We have to repair these things because, for instance, should we lose a tie rod end and lose steering capability and have an accident, and we know about it ahead of time, we're certainly open to some liability there. The truck right now, with this repair list, would cost $251 less than what we would pay for principal and interest under this current bonding at a level of $40,000 for 10 years at 3.8% interest, which is what I checked with Betty this morning. So if this truck ran perfectly all summer and all winter into next year without a single other repair, it would be costing us almost exactly the same as the new truck would be costing us. So basically, since we can't count on that kind of performance from a 22-year-old vehicle, that's why I'm saying it's more economical for the city to purchase the new truck.
You're not proposing a new truck, though?
Yes, the new truck is
A used
$37,500.
$37,500?
A new truck, the cost of a 2008 Ford F-350 is $27,421. We are assuming, because we've been offered, we have not put this out for bid, but we have been offered $5,000 trade-in value on the current truck, basically for the engine and transmission. We would do the new plow hookup, adding in $1,300. We come up to $23,721. Then adding on all the parts that I just mentioned to make the truck capable for use both winter and summer, that's an additional $13,789. We come up to $37,510.
Yes.
There is another truck out there available for a lesser cost
That's right.
with the warranty, which I believe Dan Ortner would be okay with. The last conversation I had with him, I don't know.
I think it's time to call Tom up. Maybe, could we ask Tom to comment on that? Because this is a truck that's up at either Dave Holt or Randy Eiten, I think.
Ford.
And Tom, could you
Mr.
come up
Zulli,
and-
will you come up and answer questions for us?
I'll try.
Okay.
I guess there's two options here, right? The 2005 half-ton, or 1-ton at the one place with the warranty. So with the total with all the parts needed on that truck comes to $26,900.
Did anybody else not get a copy of it?
Didn't get a copy of it, so I.
No, it is not in your packet. We had not expected to talk about this particular truck. This is the reason this truck has been looked at before by Water Utility, if I'm correct, and we've looked at this truck. The drawback for us on this truck is that it is a 10-cylinder gas engine truck. And
2005?
yes, the older truck, the used truck, is a gas-powered 10-cylinder truck, and that is one of the drawbacks. But Tom, you may have other things you want to say about it.
Yeah, that's basically what I was gonna say. It's been looked at by the water department, and they rejected it for a couple reasons. And that was one of our concerns, that it was gasoline, and probably a diesel's much better when we're hauling heavy loads and things like that.
Could I direct the discussion a little bit here? I think the question, right now, our item is, should we amend the budget? And so we're talking dollars and not necessarily the specific truck that we buy. So if that guides you a little bit. The question as I saw it, and I went and looked at these trucks, we have two older one-ton trucks right now. I mean, we want to get the oldest one would be retired because it's starting to have lots of repair bills. The other one is almost as old, and they'd really like a new truck. The question is, can we postpone it for a year? Is it smarter to buy it right now? My recommendation was to postpone it. I have some question about whether we really should be doing all that concrete work in-house. We don't do curb and gutter in-house. To be doing the concrete work that we're doing, I wonder about bidding that out. I asked about that, and maybe you want to comment on that.
Sure. And I did look into that, per your request.
Yeah.
I talked to a few contractors, Zappa Brothers Construction in North Hudson, and Bailey Construction, who has gotten the contract for curb and gutter the last couple of years. Normally, the street department does 15 to 20 catch basins a year with our crew. Zappa's kind of gave us a rough estimate, and it's really hard to estimate, because once you start digging down into these older structures, a lot of them have clay pipes, and when you get digging in there, sometimes they break off, and then you think you have a small hole, and you end up with a really big hole. So, they can say what a normal price would be if everything went perfect, which doesn't happen too often. But Gary's prices range from $3,200 for a really small one, 2.5 feet deep, which we really don't have very many of, but and they range from there up to $5,200 for a 4-foot height, which is still pretty low. And then they added on like so many dollars per lineal foot upwards, and didn't really get into if they ran into any problems. They didn't get into that. Chuck Bailey's estimate was around $5,000 to $5,200 per catch basin.
We do 20 of them.
Yeah, I'm saying if we can get 15 to 20 a year, that's pretty good for our crew. So if you just average, say, $5,000 a catch basin, if we had a contractor, that's $100,000. I figured out if we did the work, we have probably $1,200 into materials. That's with metal casting, precast cement in the floor, say a few yards of concrete for the curb and gutter that you have to restore, the asphalt and things like that. Normally, if everything goes good on a smaller catch basin, we can do that probably in 3 days with 2 guys doing it. Now that we got our new front end, or the backhoe and things like that, that's really helped. So at our service rate per hour, I believe, when we do work for other companies, it's $42 an hour. So if you take 40, if my math is correct, you take 42 times 48, that's a little over $2,000. We can do a bigger catch basin for $3,200. If we do at $3,200, we do 20 of them. That's $64,000 compared to $100,000. So I think we can do it much cheaper, actually. And then when we run into those problems, we're not getting those extra charges that we don't have any control over. If we just do flat work, like a section of sidewalk, I talked to a couple different contractors, and their average Square footage for 4 inches, about $6 a square foot. Say if we did a small section, like a 10 by 8 piece of concrete, that takes a yard of concrete. At $6 a foot, that would be about $480. If we did that, section, I figured we'd probably have maybe 3 hours into it at $42 an hour. For that section of sidewalk, we'd have $231, or about $1.63 a square foot. So I think we can do it much cheaper in-house. The other thing is the availability and time. Like these contractors, if we had a big job, like say if we're going to do, like some mill and overlay projects, and it was all bid out in that, you might do pretty good. But say if we had an emergency, I don't think either one of these contractors are they going to, say if we had a big sinkhole in the street, I don't think that they're going to drop their big project to come here. So then we'd have to deal with that anyway, so.
So my
Okay.
question is there another truck that we could use to go do this stuff with?
Well, and that was our whole point of this truck is, and like Mr. O'Malley said, that this truck isn't really only a cement truck. It was going to be used for a cement truck, a water supply truck when we're crack filling. That was required by OSHA. We also can use this as long as it has a tank on there for spraying weeds, snow plowing, and one thing I promised Jack Rowe that I'd keep checking into this anti-icing thing, and we'd like to equip that truck with that possibility also sometime.
So the question is, do we have another truck that could fill that need right now?
Not really.
Okay.
I think, that we are buying a new truck, whether we like it or not. The only question is, are we buying it one part at a time, like we currently are, or are we going to buy another truck? I think that, if I might suggest a solution here, that if you will allow my motion and Mr. Moore said second to carry, we can come back. We haven't even put this up for bid. So we can come back to you with the alternatives, because we will then have the opportunity to give you concrete facts and figures, and we can go from there.
Well, that was my point, is that we can amend the budget to include this. We can amend it again later, or make the specific decision on the specific vehicle at another point. So we have a motion and a second. Thank you, Tom. Are there any other questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The motion to approve the 2008 budget amendment is passed. Next item is consider new taxi service application. We received an application from a group of gentlemen that are here tonight. The Finance Committee voted to approve their application, or recommend that we schedule a public hearing on their application. Sorry, thank you, Catherine. Is there any further discussion on the application? Yes.
We don't need to talk about anything tonight.
No, what you're doing really is
Public hearing?
scheduling a public hearing. The ordinance requires a public hearing with a Class 1 notice, and there's now 2 applications, and so a hearing on both can be.
I'm not
Oh,
certain
okay,
that the first party actually followed through with their application. They
Oh,
came
okay.
to our meeting last time wanting sort of like a concept plan approval. And we said, no, you have to pay the fee, and these gentlemen have paid the fee. They've submitted
So this is
their.
a completely new one?
This is a complete application, ready to go from a completely new, different group.
So then all you're doing is scheduling.
We're scheduling a public hearing.
Move to schedule the public hearing at, I think, Denny Darnold's disposal.
And that's,
Fine.
would that be you
If
moving schedule?
you do a Class 1 notice, June 1st is going to be your first meeting by the time you
Okay.
can do the public hearing, but regardless, you gotta do the timing of the Class 1 notice, so Kathy and I, it would be the first meeting or second meeting in June. I don't think you can do it in May, so.
Yeah, move to
Okay.
schedule a public hearing at a date to be determined,
To be determined.
either the first or second meeting, John.
I'll second.
And a second. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We'll schedule a hearing. Next item actually is to be postponed, but I'd just like to comment on it. It was from the, well, it's on your agenda under Public Works Committee, but it actually came from the Park Board. Okay, and it was in your packet as painting and sealing the silo out at White Camp Park. I mentioned to you at our last meeting that I had started the process of reviewing our procurement policy. That's been going through staff review. We have a draft. I think we'll be ready to bring that to the Finance Committee at the next meeting. As part of that, we looked at this and said this neither met our current policy or our future policy, so it needs some more work before it's ready to come back, and so that's been removed from our agenda for now. Next is unfinished business, update on projects. I don't believe there really is very much. I told Chuck that he didn't need to come because I didn't think we had any need for any update tonight, so he's not with us tonight. Unfinished business, item number B is resolution authorizing Ehlers and Associates, Inc. to solicit bids for $2.3 million general obligation promissory notes to finance our 2008 capital improvement projects. This was resolution 5-08. We had a first reading at our last meeting, and since we knew at that time that there might be some changes, we have before you now a updated resolution. That'll need to be changed a little bit again with tonight's discussion about the truck. Betty, would you come up and be ready to answer questions on this for us?
I would really like to ask if we could postpone that on the agenda, if we can move that down, because I have a feeling Sean will be here in about 5 minutes.
Okay. Without objection, we'll do that. Let's postpone that until Sean becomes present. Let's move on to new business. Number 9A, request for Stipes Shows Carnival to be held May 8th through 11th, 2008 in Plaza 94 parking lot. Move to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions?
I'm curious if this is typically this late.
Because the equipment's already there? They're pretty confident we're going to approve it, I think.
Normally, it does come in a bit earlier.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Their application or request is approved. Item B, easement agreement with property owner to construct a fence at 70 Coachlight Drive. Mr. David Gray's going to tell us about that.
Good evening. For those of you that don't know me, I'm David Gray, the Assistant Building Inspector, Zoning Administrator. Amber and Jeremy Haddon own a home at 70 Coachlight Drive, and they're proposing to construct a fence around the perimeter of the backyard. 2 sections of that fence would fall inside an easement for a storm sewer. I guess I'm recommending approval of an easement agreement. The Haddons have reviewed that agreement, and they're willing to sign that agreement. The agreement does get recorded at the Register of Deeds office, so will be on file for future homeowners. So I do recommend approval of the easement agreement.
Staff recommendation is to allow the Haddons to construct 2 15-foot sections of fence within an easement area, and we need to approve that and authorize the signing of the easement agreement. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded. Any further discussion or questions?
David, when you look at the issue of obstruction and stormwater,
Yeah, but their proposed plan will not affect the stormwater.
the issue here is that the stormwater is not blocked to the point that causes a problem for the private property owners. So.
Clog. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. The next item is consider an amendment to the Municipal Code, Chapter 145, intoxicating liquor and fermented malt beverages, Section 145-18, delinquent taxes and assessments. This was prepared by the city attorney as ordinance number 2-08. We can have discussion and first reading, or we can suspend the rules, whatever your pleasure is. Do you want to tell them about it first?
Sure. The situation is currently the city conditions or no alcohol beverage license can be issued if there's delinquent claims owing to the city and also or delinquent claims owing or delinquent state taxes. There's been litigation on this and the courts have ruled, yes, you can condition the license on payment of all amounts owing to the city. That's a valid city concern. You cannot on amounts owing to the state. The city doesn't serve as a collection agency for the state, basically. So our code was never amended to be consistent with that case law. And so what I'm proposing is that section of the ordinance 145-18B3 be repealed, so it doesn't refer to collection of the state taxes. And then also amending 145-16A, which now talks about suspension and revocation of license, to also talk about suspension, non-renewal, and revocation, because I think, and I'm not certain of the time the statute was changed, but now you cannot deny renewal of a license without some type of notice and hearing. So what would happen is we would notify, and currently, just so you know, packets have been set out to current licensees, and they've all been notified of any taxes or claims they might be owing to the city. But if this council may not renew because of that reason, we need to notify them of that fact and give them an opportunity for a hearing on the matter. And that could occur either at a separate time or a council meeting. But I'm just amending the ordinance to include non-renewal in that whole process. So then what we're left with is an ordinance that's consistent with both city practice. But to my knowledge, we've never collected state taxes under that code and state law.
Move to suspend the rules.
We have a motion to suspend the
Second.
rules and a second. We need a roll call vote on that.
Morset?
Yes.
O'Malley?
Yes.
Burchell?
Yes.
Bernard?
Yes.
Brokaw?
Yes.
Move to adopt ordinance number 2-08.
We have a motion to adopt 2-08. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. And I guess I should just point out that the motion to suspend the rules in specific was that we would not hold a first reading and bring it back to our next meeting for a second meeting, but that would suspend the rules towards adoption right here. I think that's reasonable because we're not in compliance with state law. Right now, we couldn't enforce our current city code.
Well, as much as I like to be transparent and notify the public about everything we do, this is just basic housekeeping.
It is.
It's a slam dunk.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Ordinance 2-08 is adopted. Item 9D, consider amendments to Municipal Code, Chapters 124-8B, 184-2F, 220-4, and 96-1B to prohibit issuance of business license permits to applicants with delinquent taxes, assessments, forfeitures, or other claims to the city. This would be ordinance number 3-08, and this also comes from our city attorney.
This is just to kind of complete the requirements under existing case law is that alcohol beverage licenses should not be singled out. The same type of requirement should be made for all business type permits. I went through the code and tried to identify, what I identified was the ongoing business type permits. There's lots of permits in there. They're not all ongoing, and I thought these were most similar to an ongoing alcohol beverage license permit. So that's what this does. Again, to my knowledge, it's never come up, but this would be the last piece that would put us into compliance with both our practice and the existing case law. And if we find any other permits, ongoing business type permits, we would need to amend the code accordingly.
Okay, do we have a motion towards adoption? Here again, you have the option of having a first reading, if you'd like, or suspending the rules.
Move for first reading.
We have a motion for a first reading. Is there a second?
I'll second for discussion.
And a second. You want to, do you have anything to say first?
Yes, I want to explain why this differs, in my mind, from simple housekeeping. On the first action that we took moments ago, we were not taking anything away from any licensee. We were, in fact, giving up a previously thought to be a right of the city to take action. In this case, we are notifying direct sellers, pawnbrokers, transient merchants, et cetera, that we are going to be taking something away from them, and I think that we need time to get that word out.
Mr. Morissette?
No, that's what I wanted, yeah.
That it? Any other discussion? We have a motion and a second. If there's no more discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. We'll bring this back for a second reading at our next meeting. Let's go back up to the item on the bonds. Sean is here now from Ehlers and Associates, so we're going back up to 7B on our agenda, the resolution authorizing Ehlers to solicit bids for $2.3 million general obligation promissory notes to finance our 2008 capital improvement projects, Resolution 5-08.
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Council. I believe everyone received the handout, but I do have extra copies if any are necessary. Okay. I will go through the pre-sale report. I did talk with Betty beforehand, and it sounds like we will have to make a few adjustments given the final decisions related to the capital projects for 2008, and we can certainly do that. Just at the outset, the report was prepared using I think the budgeted amount. So again, we'll make the adjustment based on action from tonight's meeting. Okay? But I will go through the report highlighting the exhibits, and as I do so, feel free to stop me and ask questions as we move through it. Maybe we could start on Exhibit 1. This year's proposed financing really is comprised of two parts. There is the financing for this year's capital projects, and then there is also a proposed refinancing for a portion of the 2006 $1,050,000 promissory note that was issued at that time. And we're combining this into one issue that will be repaid over a 10-year period, and it'll be paid back in full. The 2006 issue has a balloon payment that is due next year, and we'll get to this in a second, but we're proposing to refinance half of it, and then the other half would become part of your budget as things sit currently. But the combination of the new money financing and the refinancing of the 2006 issue, per my projections, would result in an issue of $2,035,000. In looking at it from the perspective of the budget final decision on capital projects that you discussed this evening, I think we're estimating about $1,940,000 will be the final number. But if it's okay with the council, I'll proceed talking about it with this number for now, knowing full well that we'll make that change. Okay. We've used interest rate projections that are about 1/4 point above current market conditions. But what we would propose to do is finance this in the way the city has done their bond issues or note issues in the past, in that we put them out for competitive bid. We solicit competitive bids from both local and national investors, and we bring those back for approval by the city council at a future meeting. In this case, I think we're looking at your next meeting in May, if I'm not mistaken. So that would be the plan moving forward. Any questions on this at this point?
Sean, are we bound by a May 15th drop-dead date on soliciting bids? There was a discussion at one point that we needed to be done by May 15th.
Yeah, the May 15th issue is the closing of the tax increment district, and we did talk about that in the context of this year's financing, but we've already handled that issue in conjunction to the financing, so that's been taken care of.
Thanks.
Okay, if we could move to Exhibit 2, and actually, this exhibit does tie in to that discussion about the tax increment financing district as well that we've had. And I know we've got some new folks here. I believe some of you were at some of the discussions we had prior to the election, so you may be somewhat aware of these issues, but we're happy to talk in more detail about this if necessary. What this exhibit represents is a combination of a couple of things. In blue, and I think, does everyone have this in color? Okay, great. In blue is the existing debt of the city. So this is issues that have been done in the past that are currently outstanding and the city is repaying. In the maroonish color is the proposed 2008 note issue. And then in yellow is looking forward, prospective financing and the impact on the city's debt levy and we used, and this was for planning purposes, not tying the council to any numbers, but for planning purposes, it was $2 million a year to finance annual capital improvements. And then there is one larger issue, a $5 million issue, which I believe was more related to facility type financing. So we've put that all together on this exhibit and took both existing debt and potential future debt into account when looking at this year's financing. And the goal really is to take the mill rate from about 1 mil for debt, and it takes it up to about 1.21, 1.22, right in that range. And the idea for this sort of a format was to tie into the impact of the tax increment district closing and bringing that tax base back to the city for you to levy over for your general operating, capital, and debt needs, and putting together really a financing structure and an overall levy structure moving forward that is very similar to where the city has been in the past. And that's really the goal of this structure with this issue, and then also looking forward with the other future financings over the next couple of years. So the idea was really to bring it up to a certain level and then hold it at that level going forward. Now, the other, Exhibit 3 also represents this, and I want to just complete the picture in looking at it on Exhibit 3 as well. Exhibit 3, if we look at 2008, looks at the split between what the city is levying for operating and capital needs and what the city is levying for debt repayment needs. The operating and capital are in blue. The more the maroonish reddish colored, that is debt. So right now, for 2008, current year we're in, $3.19 per $1,000 of value for operating and 0.99 for debt. The structure of this financing for this year is looking at going to about $1.21, right in that range for debt. Again, looking at the future debt as well. And we're projecting that the operating mill rate will go down next year. And again, from past discussions, the reason for that is the combination of closing the tax increment district, and also the city is subject to levy limits. So there's a limit as to how much the operating side can go up next year, even though you're closing the tax increment district and adding about $190 million in tax base back to the general fund tax base of the city. So again, this overall financing plan is set up to keep the city approximately at your current overall mill rate level, which is $4.18 per $1,000 of valuation. So any questions on that? Now, that's not to say that you won't have some flexibility in dealing with this going forward. There are ways throughout the rest of this year that this can be dealt with to adjust that number to a different level if that's where the city wants to end up. This only keeps this option on the table. Again, you'll have options to go to a lower level than this, as an example, if you'd like, with next year's budget process.
Is
Okay.
the 296 the state limit that was set on us?
It's the state limit's actually tied to the actual dollar levy. So what the 296 represents is the city increasing to about an 8.08%, I think is what we're looking at, the operating increase, which is our projection of the maximum that will be allowed under the state levy limits. So the 296 represents that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and lastly, on Exhibit 4,
Could I interrupt you for a minute?
Sure,
Because
ma'am.
I'd just like to make a comment there. What that 296, to me, the way I'd explain that is, this is spending everything that we can and borrowing everything that we can without raising the mill rate.
that's correct, under the levy limits. Yep. Okay, any other questions on Exhibits 2 or 3 or other points? Okay, Exhibit 4. The other, just more to update the council on, the type of debt that we're proposing to issue for the capital projects is general obligation debt. And general obligation debt is the strongest pledge the council can make to the financing markets, because it really is backed by your ability to levy taxes. There is a limit, though, that the state puts on communities' ability to use general obligation debt. That limit is 5% of the total value of the city. So you take the equalized value of the city of Hudson, 5% of that, that's your limit. Really, this exhibit is here to show that the city has used general obligation debt fairly conservatively in the past. It's represented here under the red columns at the bottom. The blue column is, or the blue line, excuse me, is the current borrowing capacity, should you go up to it, for the city of Hudson, and the red is your outstanding debt. So you've got 10 to 12 million in general obligation debt outstanding. Your limit is actually close to 80 million. So as I said, the city has used that fairly conservatively in the past.
And we're staying on mark to do that, correct?
Yes, yes. Unless there is something very dramatic that occurs, I don't think the city will ever get anywhere near that maximum. Okay? And last, the resolution on the final page really is just the first step in the process of issuing this year's notes. It's a resolution authorizing us to put together the offering statement, official statement, or OS as it's commonly called, market that out to potential investors, and then solicit bids on the May 19th date. When we bring those bids back for council approval at that time, that's really where you make your decision to accept a bid or not. Nothing is finalized until that bid's before you and you accept one as the winner. So with that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. And one last reminder, we will be changing the numbers based on discussion tonight. And one last thing too, the city, I think you may recall, has an outstanding bond rating, a very good A1 rating. And as a part of the process of issuing this year's notes, we will have a conference call. I think we're set for next Wednesday, the 14th, to have a conference call with Moody's Investor Service to update the city, or excuse me, the Investor Service, Moody's Investor Service, on the financial situation of the city of Hudson and the debt plans for this year. I think we're going to have a lot of positives to talk about, particularly with the closing of the tax increment district and that tax base coming back to the general tax base of the city.
Thank you, Sean. Any questions or discussion? We had a first reading of this Resolution 5-08 at the last meeting. The amount needs to be amended now. Could you give me again what the amount was now, with tonight's changes? It's a moving target, but are we at 1.9? Or 1,940,000, that's the amount that we should be writing in on Resolution 5-08.
And is that including
That includes what we discussed tonight,
40,000.
yes.
Yeah. Because it was at 1.9 with what I had recommended.
I'll move for passage of Resolution 5-08 under the new number.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? I'd like to comment just a little bit more on the impact of this. I think historically, before state-imposed levy limits, we probably borrowed around $1 million a year for a number of years. Am I right? Was it around $1 million?
We were doing $1 million to $2 million every other year.
Yeah.
Average $1 million.
Okay. And as you can see, as you look through on the Exhibit 2, we're jumping up this year, and partly it's because we're buying that park, and we're paying for half of that Prospect Park purchase this year with the intention of financing to the 10-year bonds, the other half of it next year. Right now, we have that as a short-term promissory note with a local bank. The intention here is that in order to do what's in Exhibit 2 is that we would probably be bonding to build a building. I don't know if you saw that in here, but what did you have in there? A $5 million building.
Correct. It's a one-time, it's actually in 2009, $5 million, and then annually $2 million for capital projects. The $5 million is projected to be repaid in 20 years. All of the $2 million financings are 10-year financings.
So that would be taking us up from where we had traditionally been $1 million, and that's kind of been creeping up, but then we'd go forward at $2 million. We may or may not do that. The other point that I'd like to make in regard to the closing of the TID is just that that tax increment district and the development of the business park out there has yet to benefit city taxpayers. One way that they can benefit is through us spending the tax money wisely for public improvements. That's one way, but another way is through tax cut. And I hope that the council doesn't get blinders on that we're going to spend and borrow everything we can right up to the maximum, because that may not be the wisest. I'd like to see us set a target and have some discussion about this as the council as a whole for what that target should be, because our advisors want that just because they want guidance from us so that they can start thinking and planning. And I think it's a discussion that we need to have, and I'm not sure if we need to have that on an agenda as a specific item, but I think it's about time, because budget planning, buying buildings, building buildings, you know, here we are looking at this tonight with the idea that there'd be $5 million spent in 2009. I think it's time for us to start to make some of those decisions. We have no further discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. The resolution 5-08 is approved as amended. With that, I think we've completed our agenda down to communications and recommendations of the mayor. I have a few proclamations to make. The first one is in regard to Police Week. Whereas the Congress and President of the United States have designated Tuesday, May 15th as National Peace Officers Memorial Day, and the week in which it falls as Police Week, now therefore I call upon all citizens of Hudson and all patriotic, civic, and educational organizations to observe the week of May 11th through 17th, 2008 as Police Week, and to commemorate police officers, past and present, who by their faithful and loyal devotion to their responsibilities have rendered a dedicated service to the community. And the second proclamation is in regard to Municipal Clerks Week. I recognize the week of May 4th through May 10th, 2008 as Municipal Clerks Week, and further extend appreciation to our certified municipal clerk and to all municipal clerks for the vital services they perform and their exemplary dedication to the communities they represent. Thank you, Nancy. And the third of these is in regard to the National Association of Letter Carriers Food Drive. Whereas the Hudson Post Office letter carriers, with the cooperation of the local United Way and the Campbell Soup Company, will be seeking food donations from the public in an effort to help feed many families in need. I now therefore proclaim Saturday, May 10th, 2008 as Letter Carriers Food Drive Day, and I encourage citizens to recognize and support the merits of this cause by contributing generously to this worthwhile project. I already mentioned to you about the communication in regard to the Library Foundation, that I got a letter from Jeff Zeiss saying that the $1,800 was being returned from the Library Foundation to the Library Board. I'd like to make a reappointment due to schedule and business commitment. Alderperson Pam Brokaw will not be able to serve as a member of the North Hudson Community Access Board. Alan Burchell served on that in representing the council on that board last year, and he's agreed to accept that appointment. If there's no objection, I'd like your confirmation of reappointing Alan to serve on the Community Access Board.
By unanimous acclaim, I would say.
By unanimous acclaim. Great. That's done. That's all I have. Any communications from any alderperson?
Yes, I would like to commend our city administrator, Devin Willey, who, without any notice whatsoever in advance, has completed and sent off the grant application to the DNR for Prospect Park.
I have one announcement for those residents in District 1. The shovel and the work going on off of Cooley and Higgin, I believe that's correct, Danny, right? I think they're restoring Storm Pond number 5, correct?
Correct.
Crestview and Higgin. So that there is no building going on there, it's just a matter of restoring that stormwater pond.
It is, and it's an important project because we want to retain that water there so they don't have warm water running down immediately into the river down along First Street, where there's beginning to be a milfoil problem, and it's partly because of what's going on there. Other communications, any alderperson? City attorney? Nothing? City administrator was excused early because he had a family event to attend, an honors society induction. With that, we're ready for adjournment.
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.